Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe is off this morning. Right now on Morning News Now, crisis point. Frustration at a fever pitch nearly 2 years into the pandemic. The U.S. now averaging more than 500,000 new COVID cases per day. With the fast-spreading Omicron strain leading the surge, and hospitals are being pushed to the brink once again. We'll take you to one of the areas hardest hit. Plus, President Biden doubling down on the push for vaccinations, urging Americans to protect themselves by getting the shot. More of his message and the efforts to provide free at-home tests to every American. And the CDC updating its guidance once again when it comes to isolation for those with COVID but without symptoms. We have team coverage with more on the fallout, the fears, and what the experts want you to know to stay safe. School showdown developing overnight. COVID concerns causing controversy at Chicago's public schools. This morning, classes canceled after teachers vote to return to remote learning until case numbers go down. Details on the talks now underway between the union and the city. Capitol concerns. Heightened security on Capitol Hill as lawmakers prepare to mark 1 year since the January 6th insurrection. Now, law enforcement reflecting on what's changed and what still needs to change.
We're right now probably 200 officers below what we had pre-January 6th, and we're 400 below what we really need.
Details on what's being done to prevent a repeat of last year's riot. And snow problem. From whiteout conditions to the bitter cold, extreme winter weather is creating dangerous conditions for people all over the country. We'll share some tips on what you can do to stay safe all season long. Good morning. We're happy to have you with us, and we do begin again today with the fast-moving Omicron variant. A new NBC News tally shows the U.S. has surpassed 57 million COVID cases, and health experts warn the full extent of this COVID wave has yet to come. According to the CDC, the Omicron variant accounts for more than 95% of COVID cases in the U.S. Listen to that. And to put that in perspective, just 1 month ago, Omicron accounted for 1% of cases compared to the once dominant Delta variant. And take a look at this map. In just 1 week, 33 states and Washington, D.C. have set records for COVID cases, hospitalizations, or both. President Biden addressed the nation about the rise of cases and the importance of testing during his public address yesterday. Take a listen.
We're seeing COVID-19 cases among vaccinated in workplaces across America, including here at the White House. But if you're vaccinated and boosted, you are highly protected. You know, be concerned about Omicron, but don't be alarmed.
We have a team with us this morning, including Dr. Bob Lahita, to break down the newest guidelines from the CDC, and NBC News global security reporter Dan DeLuce with an update on military support inside struggling hospitals. But first, let's bring in NBC News correspondent Sam Brock and NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Good morning to both of you. And Sam, I will start with you in Florida. So you're outside Jackson Memorial Hospital, I understand it, where, like much of the country, you're seeing this spike, but actually you are in the state seeing the fastest spike in COVID cases. Listen to this, up 744% in just the last 14 days. Tell us how that hospital behind you doing. What's happening in your state? What's it looking like right now, Sam?
Savannah, good morning. Right now, Florida has seen just this explosion of cases in the last couple of weeks. As you said, about 700% increase in infections. At the same time, you have seen a lot more hospitalizations, but not at that level, a couple 100% instead of 700%. What does that mean contextually, though? At the height of Delta, which was over the summer in Florida, there was about 17,000 people hospitalized in the state of Florida. Right now, it's about 7,000. The issue right now for healthcare workers, Savannah, is not necessarily available beds. They have the beds. The problem right now is not enough people, doctors and nurses, to take care of sick patients. Attrition and folks who have gotten sick themselves working on the front lines has driven down the availability and capability of hospitals to care for COVID-19 patients. Those patients are not getting as sick as they were during Delta. That comes directly from the Florida Hospital Association. There's also another difference with Delta. Here's the president speaking with us yesterday.
During Delta, over 50% of our ICU beds were occupied for individuals being treated for COVID at the peak of Delta. We're at about 12% today of our ICU beds occupied for COVID. The biggest challenge for all of our hospitals remains the severity of the staffing shortage.
And Savannah, another example of that, only about 30 or 40 minutes from where I am right now in Fort Lauderdale, there is Holy Cross, which had to shut down its labor and delivery unit, not because of unavailability of beds, because they don't have enough people to staff that unit. They had to divert critical staffing shortages, divert those folks to other areas of the hospital care for COVID-19 patients. That's the kind of thing you could continue to see here in Florida and elsewhere as this crisis deepens.
Absolutely. And a reminder of what happens other than just those beds filling up from COVID patients. There's so much more fallout than that. Monica, let's bring you in here. So we heard from President Biden yesterday, and we're expecting to hear from the White House COVID response team later this morning in a virtual briefing. What's the latest messaging there?
Well, ideally, we're going to be getting a few more specifics from that COVID response team, Savannah, because yesterday, President Biden conceded that the testing situation is frustrating to him. The fact that even the White House is falling short on its own promise that by early January, which is where we are right now, there would be this government website up and running or close to launch so that Americans could log on and get those at-home rapid tests sent to them via mail. As we all have seen and experienced, those are still very hard to come by. And the president did admit they would like to do more on this, but that he just couldn't announce anything further because the contracts are not even finalized. So that's something that really could stretch further into January. So we're waiting to hear more from the COVID response team. But I think you can also expect them to echo what the president hit home yesterday, which is that he said there's no excuse for anyone to be unvaccinated. And for those people who are vaccinated who might still be waiting to get their boosters, he said the time has never really been more urgent. So we could get some more information from the CDC today about particularly kids in the age range of 12 to 15 who might get final approval for their booster shots, and those timelines shrinking a little bit, especially for those who got Pfizer and the immunocompromised. So we expect to hear a little bit more about all of that. But the president's message also yesterday is what we expect to hear from these health officials. This is something to watch, to be vigilant, but not to be outright panicked at this moment.
And Sam, quickly before I let you both go, let's talk about the leadership in your state. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is receiving some backlash for the way that he sort of categorized testing, calling for residents to not get tested if they're asymptomatic. First, let's listen to some of that.
You'll have certain people that will go out and will just get tested all the time at some of these sites, and that's not a good use of resources.
Testing people that have no symptoms, are not sick, and calling them cases, people, and making them into people who are sick when they have no symptoms. Let's go back to people making sort of voluntary decisions, living their lives, pursuing what they want, and not sort of defining everything that they do around whether or not a test is positive or something else like that.
So, Sam, tell us, how are people in the state responding to that? Are they struggling to get their hands on a test in the first place? What's been the backlash?
There was definitely a lot of curiosity, Savannah, as to how Governor DeSantis was going to address what is now a state that is awash in COVID cases. We had not heard from the governor in a couple of weeks over the holidays. So what was he going to come out and say? And yesterday, as you heard right there, asymptomatic people, according to Governor DeSantis, should not be getting tested right now, which really flies in the face of what scientists and infectious disease experts have been saying for weeks, months, years, which is that you can be asymptomatic and still pass the virus on to someone who is more vulnerable and will be symptomatic, could get very sick. So healthcare officials right now were apoplectic at what the governor said yesterday, and not just those remarks about changing the profile of who gets tested, but also he doubled down on monoclonal antibodies instead of talking about getting people vaccinated. Now, monoclonal antibodies, Regeneron specifically, did wonders for people during Delta here in Florida. But to kind of put all of your eggs in that basket right now, when you have a state that's 63% vaccinated, and where most of the people that are ending up in the hospital, including the 500 or so over my shoulder here at Jackson Health, are unvaccinated, you might have expected to hear more language on that, less on the monoclonal antibodies.
Sam, apoplectic. It's one of those words when used to describe something so well, it just really hits home. All right, Sam and Monica, thank you both so much for kicking us off this morning. Now, Chicago public school officials have canceled classes for hundreds of thousands of students after the teachers union voted to temporarily transition back to remote learning due to the spike we're seeing. At a press conference shortly before last night's vote, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot compared the negotiations to Groundhog Day, criticizing the move as an illegal work stoppage. The teachers union tweeted in response that the move to remote learning will be temporary and will end when COVID-19 cases subside or the mayor signs an agreement with the union. Now, that vote comes as a staggering number of children are getting sick with COVID. Hospitalizations are skyrocketing as the majority of kids actually remain unvaccinated. We have the story of one 6-year-old who's been battling COVID for 3 weeks, and Von Hilliard has her story from her hospital bed.
The numbers are stark. The country's youngest generation contracting COVID at a higher rate than at any point during the pandemic. This, the rise in new hospitalizations of kids under the age of 18, meteoric compared to any other point during the pandemic.
Aria, how many days have you been at the hospital now?
18.
Among them, 6-year-old Aria Shapiro, who has been battling COVID at Phoenix Children's Hospital for 18 days, celebrating the holidays from her hospital bed.
COVID really put Aria on a turn that I've never seen her epilepsy go in.
Aria, who is epileptic, had received only her first dose of the vaccine. Her mom, Sarah, now says she wishes they had gone earlier.
From what I've seen with my own eyes, that COVID is not safe for all children. And though I know my daughter has an underlying condition, there's a lot of other people here that don't have underlying conditions where children are struggling with COVID.
As the Omicron variant sweeps through the nation, it's infecting kids, many of them with their families scrambling to get vaccinated as school goes back into session.
Kids are definitely not immune to this virus. Although most children do okay, they have an upper respiratory condition or situation happening. There are some cases that are extremely serious.
All our friends are getting COVID. There's like half of our class is not here. Yeah.
Cases among children are up more than 60%, with 300,000 new infections reported in the week after Christmas alone. Most of those cases are mild, but over that same time period, 574 kids on average every day have been admitted to the hospital. That's double from the week before.
Before we had break here, it wasn't hard because there was like nobody out. But now there's like 5 or 6 kids out right now. And it's harder because a lot of them are our friends. So it's, for me, I'm just worrying about them now because I hope they're okay.
Despite the FDA approving the booster shot for kids 5 years and older just this week, most young kids in America have still yet to get even a single shot. Have you gotten vaccinated yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Has this led you to think more about getting vaccinated?
A little.
In the 2 months since the shots were authorized for children ages 5 to 11, just over 15% have been fully vaccinated. That number higher for children ages 12 to 17 at 53%, but still well below the average for adults.
How much more worried should parents be about their kids?
They should always be worried about the Omicron variant because they never know how their child is going to react if they get infected.
Many of them with their families scrambling to get vaccinated as school goes back into session.
Your second shot.
Yeah.
Hey, so you're getting your vaccine. You're ready to go. Why did you decide to get your COVID vaccine?
Because I don't want to get sick.
This as other kids like Aria continue their fights in America's hospitals.
What would you tell other kids that are watching?
Be brave.
Be brave.
Thanks to Von Hilliard for that report. And doctors say parents can look out for symptoms in their kids like dehydration and trouble with breathing. Now, hospitals in some states are so overwhelmed with COVID cases that the military is being called in to help. At the request of FEMA, military medical personnel are now heading to New York and New Hampshire. 8 other states are already getting that assistance. NBC News global security reporter Dan DeLuce joins me now. Dan, good morning. So we're seeing these shortages of hospital workers across the country because they're either out sick with COVID, like so many people are from their jobs right now, or they're even leaving the field altogether because of this burnout they've experienced for nearly 2 years now. Tell us about this new deployment of military personnel to New York and New Hampshire and what's going on in those 8 other states.
That's right. You heard about the tremendous pressure on hospitals, on hospital staffs. And so the military has learned that an effective way they can help is to send these small teams of nurses, doctors, and paramedics to try to shore up the gap in the manpower shortage. And so what you have is the small team going to Buffalo, New York. You have another team going to Manchester, New Hampshire to help a hospital there. And they've already deployed teams across the country in 19 states. They have plans to send teams to another 10 states, including New York and New Hampshire. So this is the Pentagon's way of trying to stave off this tremendous pressure on the hospitals that are just finding, as you said, a lot of their own healthcare workers are out having to quarantine. And so they're really just facing this manpower problem. The other thing is that some states are mobilizing the National Guard also to try to make up the gap.
Mm-hmm. Now, Dan, what's this like when these military members join this fight? I mean, on that graphic there, we could see there's a 20-person team being deployed to Buffalo, New York, 15-person team being deployed to New Hampshire. What are they trained in? What kind of specific help are these military members providing here? I mean, are they used to being in this hospital environment?
These are very trained medical personnel, really experienced, seasoned professionals that are coming in. So think of it as a small cavalry arriving at the door when you're so short-handed at a lot of these hospitals. So these are full-fledged doctors, very experienced nurses, paramedics, and other specialists that can literally just step right in, hit the ground running, no training required, know exactly what's required, including in an ICU situation, to help the hospitals cope with this influx of patients and the staffing shortage. So it's really a kind of a hidden military asset that a lot of people don't think of. And the military has been helping, of course, throughout the pandemic. And this is just another example.
Absolutely. Dan DeLuz, thank you so much for joining us to talk through this morning. Let's now bring in Dr. Bob Lahita for more on the latest COVID headlines we've been discussing here. Dr. Lahita, as you probably know, is the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health. He's also professor of medicine at Rutgers and New York Medical College. Doctor, good morning. Always great to have you. So let's start with the CDC guidelines on isolation. So the agency is standing by that decision to shorten the COVID isolation period to 5 days and to not require testing to lift isolation. First, let's listen to what CDC Director Walensky said about the guidelines on Monday.
We know, based on 2 years of experience now with this virus, that the vast majority of your transmissibility happens in the day or two before you get symptoms and the 2 to 3 days afterwards. So probably about 80 to 90% of all your transmissibility has happened in those first 5 days. Mm-hmm. And we really want people to be sure if they're going to be home, they're home for the right period of time when they're maximally transmissible.
What do you make of that decision to not test out of isolation, Dr. Bob?
Well, I think this is a very prudent thing to do, particularly since, as your previous reporter had said, that there is really a shortage of doctors and nurses, and we really need to maximize or actually take care of the time that our people have to be out, and we can't have them beyond 5 days incapacitated. They can wear masks and hats and goggles and everything, but continue to work, and they don't have to test after they've been infected and have been home for 5 days. We want everybody to wear a mask for 5 days after, and in the hospital we wear N95 masks. So they don't have to retest once they have been now quarantined for 5 days and they're symptom-free. That's the most important thing, Savannah.
Symptom-free, all right. Now, the CDC is also updating its guidance for Pfizer booster shots. So they're recommending people get their third dose now 5 months after their initial series instead of 6 months. Dr. Bob, I think there's been so much confusion, and little changes like this, or hearing they should be wearing a different type of mask now, make people kind of confused, kind of concerned. I mean, what do you think about that change? Should people who got it 6 months, I mean, should there be any concern here?
No, there should be no concern, Savannah. This is all based on science and epidemiologic studies of the way both the Delta and the Omicron variant have been behaving over the last several weeks. Mm-hmm. So to lower the booster, and I'm asked this every day, to lower the booster hiatus, if you would, from 6 to 5 months is not a big deal. And I think it's going to help our employees, which particularly in the healthcare area, that are very, very tight and are lacking.
And Dr. Bob, with this variant, Omicron, it obviously is spreading so quickly. We've seen how quickly it's become this dominant variant as it sort of whips through the country. And we're seeing that a lot of these cases in vaccinated people are mostly mild. Then you come out of it and you presumably have this period of immunity. Is there light at the end of the tunnel here relatively soon if this is spreading so quickly? So many people are getting it. We're seeing these high case numbers, but then people have this immunity after?
So less than 58% of the population is vaccinated. So you're right. As the variant rips through the country, the Omicron variant, it creates a certain degree of immunity. For example, if you've been infected with Omicron, you're 4 times less likely to succumb to the Delta variant. So there's cross-reactive immunity. And so any infection, while being very bad, is going to give us immunity going forward, and maybe herd immunity.
All right. Well, that's a little bit of good news there. And Dr. Lahita, more good news. Congratulations to you. You have a new book out today called Immunity Strong. People who know that you're a friend of the show will probably be excited about this. Tell us quickly, what should viewers expect from your book?
The book tells you all about how the immune system works and all about vaccines, vaccination in a very simplified fashion so anybody can understand it. And I highly recommend it so that you understand what this pandemic is all about and how to keep yourself really strong, immunity strong and healthy.
Absolutely.
Savannah.
And that's what we love so much about you, Dr. Bob, is you do make it so simple for us to understand. And you see that little tidbit in the sub-headline there, live to 100, which is also a nice bonus there. Yeah. Dr. Bob Lahita, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations again on this book. We're really excited for you.
Thanks, Savannah.
Now, the U.S. Capitol is on high alert this morning, just a day before the anniversary of the January 6th attack. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake takes us inside the security on Capitol Hill.
From the outside, the U.S. Capitol looks much like it did this time last year, before it's ransacked by rioters on January 6th.
The way the police department's operating, our equipment, our training, our planning, all has improved since then.
With $100 million from Congress, new Capitol Police Chief Tom Manger went to work reforming the department in July.
In terms of keeping this place safe, what keeps you up at night now?
I think that right now it's the staffing issues. We're right now probably 200 officers below what we had pre-January 6th, and we're 400 below what we really need.
Congress also set aside $300 million for physical security improvements.
We have spent significant effort of reinforcing the doors, both exterior and interior.
Democratic lawmakers point to some of their Republican colleagues' efforts to downplay the attack and the few who embrace violent language as a continuing security risk.
Does the rhetoric of some of the members here, the threats, the things of that nature, make your job harder?
It certainly has increased the workload. The threats against Congress have gone through the roof.
Are we safer here now than we were then?
I think moderately.
Democrat Tim Ryan oversees Capitol security funding.
Making all this safe would be expensive.
Yeah. It's expensive to have an insurrection, and they prevent a free and fair election from getting implemented. This is pennies on the dollar to protect our society.
Chief Manger told reporters there are no concerning threats to the Capitol tied to Thursday's anniversary.
All right, Garrett Haake, thanks for that report. Now, traffic on Interstate 95 near Washington, D.C., where you just saw Garrett, is finally moving again after being stopped for more than a day because of Monday's major snowstorm. This was the same Tuesday as crews tried to clear vehicles from the interstate around 7 p.m. last night. It reopened and traffic finally started moving again. So what can we expect in our forecast this morning? Is there more wild winter weather? Let's get a check on your forecast with Bill Cairns, of course. Hey, Bill, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Savannah. Yeah, already hearing reports outside of New York City. Some bridges are being closed because of freezing rain this morning. So this is a different beast than that big winter storm 2 days ago. Temperatures in the major cities are right around the freezing mark. So we had the storm from before that melted, and then some of that's refreezing. And then there's a light glaze of ice that's coming over the region, too. So, showing you some of the pictures of D.C. The good thing that happened yesterday was that the skies were clear, the sun was out, and that was able to clear up some of the roads and some of the ice that was on them as temperatures got into the upper 30s. So the roads are much better, but still, as I just said, some of that has, some of that melted and then is now refreezing too. So just be careful, especially on the sidewalks and some of those secondary roads. So let's get to the problems this morning. Notice the temperatures in the cities themselves were right around freezing to just above freezing. It's really in the suburbs outside of the cities that we're having issues. And if you look really closely at this map, you'll see that little pink from Philadelphia up to New York City, now heading up into the southern Hudson Valley and into Connecticut. There's a little area of freezing rain that is moving through this morning, and that's causing a lot of traffic accidents around New York City early today. And that's going to move up into Connecticut, Massachusetts, and eventually even New Hampshire and Maine as we go throughout the morning. That's why we have winter weather advisories. The other big weather story, there is a significant blast of cold air coming down through the northern plains. Wind chill advisories all the way down to North Texas, but it's those wind chill warnings that feel brutal this morning. Look at Glasgow, Montana, -48 wind chill when you step outside this morning. That is dangerous stuff, all the way into the -30s now, Rapid City and even Bismarck. And tomorrow morning, this blast of cold air moves all the way down. Even Kansas City will have a -11 wind chill. So, Savannah, winter has returned. And next hour, we'll talk more about the impending snowstorm that'll be heading for the East Coast come Friday.
Absolutely. It's either that winter has returned and with a vengeance, or that we have some climate change induced weird thing going on. I don't know which one. I'd rather hear from you,
Maybe
Bill.
a little bit of both.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bill, thanks so much. And coming up, police in New Hampshire are trying to find a 7-year-old girl, but they're facing a major problem. She hasn't been seen in 2 years, and she was just reported missing. The investigation into why it took so long for someone to report she was gone, and officers' emotional pleas for answers. That's next. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. We're learning new details this morning about a missing 7-year-old New Hampshire girl who was last seen back in 2019. As NBC News Now correspondent Maura Barrett explains, police are only just now learning about her disappearance.
We're not searching for anybody right now other than Harmony.
New Hampshire police trying to make up for 2 years of lost time, searching for 7-year-old Harmony Montgomery. The community now offering a reward of more than $12,000.
Nobody's seen this young girl since late of October 2019. So what's happened in the last 2 years? Fair question, all right? That's why I'm here today, because we need assistance. We need help.
Police say they received a report about Harmony's disappearance for the first time just last week, after the mayor's office passed along an email it received. The Manchester mayor's office wouldn't tell NBC News who it was from, but that the email expressed concern both about Harmony's whereabouts and the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth, and Families. That's the agency which manages child protective and foster services. Police say the girl was last seen in Manchester when they were called to this home where Harmony lived in 2019. Investigators searched the home and surrounding neighborhood this weekend, though police say the family that lives there now is not connected with the case.
Nothing makes sense. Nothing.
Kevin Montgomery is Harmony's granduncle and says he too last saw her in the fall of 2019.
It's horrible. Frustrating. If there was a crime committed, somebody knows.
The biggest question, why did it take 2 years for the little girl to be reported missing?
It's a question I've asked. I want to focus on locating her now and dedicating all of our efforts to that. And if there was some flaw in the system, I'm not saying there was, but if there was, where was it and how's it going to be addressed?
Harmony's biological brother was adopted by Blair Miller, a Boston 25 News reporter in D.C. Miller told his station that he and his husband considered adopting Harmony because the siblings were close in foster care.
We really didn't have a choice, and because what we were told by DCF in Massachusetts was that Harmony had been reunited with her father.
The police chief, determined to continue the search, getting emotional at the most recent press conference.
I'm appealing to everyone. Help us find this little girl. Someone knows something. Do what is right and call in.
Now, we were hoping to get more information about Harmony's family background, as we understand that she might have been in foster care. And so I reached out to the New Hampshire and Massachusetts Department of Children and Family Services, but they said that due to state and federal privacy requirements, they cannot confirm or deny any information about families that might have been involved in their department. That's saying they couldn't confirm how long or when or if at all Harmony was in foster care. But I do also want to point out that the police department has set up a dedicated 24 24-hour tip line specifically for this case for anybody that might have information about where Harmony could have been these last 2 years.
All right, Maura Barrett, thank you so much. We are hoping that Harmony returns home. Let's now take a look at what's making news around the world this morning. Matt Bodner is with us today from Moscow. Hey, Matt, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Well, we'll start this hour off on the Korean Peninsula, where the South Korean military says that the North have fired an unidentified projectile out to sea. Japan says that the projectile may have actually been another ballistic missile launch. If so, this would be the first launch we've seen from North Korea since October. Moving along now to Kazakhstan, to a very rapidly developing story. The government resigned today amid a rapid escalation in street protests against rising fuel prices. What actually began as a small action in a mining region just a few days ago has spread to most, or appears to have spread to at least most of the major cities in Kazakhstan, and including Almaty, its largest city. Like I said, many other places as well. Video on social media suggesting protesters have seized an administration building. But like I said, rapidly developing, a lot remains unclear. Will become more unclear since the government just shut down internet and cell service nationwide. We'll wrap up this hour in Chile, where 4 beekeepers were detained for protesting in front of the presidential palace on Monday. Chile is currently experiencing a mega drought, and this has put a dent in honey production because the food sources favored by bees, of course, flowers and crops, have withered. 7 police officers were stung during the protest. Back to you, Savannah.
Wow, yikes. All right, Matt, thank you so much. And coming up, schools struggling to stay open as COVID cases rise. Now, federal officials are working on ways to help. Up next, our exclusive interview with the Education Secretary on what's being done to keep kids in the classroom despite the pandemic. Plus, sticker shock, why those at-home COVID tests will soon cost more at the store. You can even find one. You're watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. This year's award season starts on Sunday with the Golden Globes, but you're probably used to hearing this. Things are going to look different this year. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association has announced that amid rising COVID cases, this year's ceremony will have no audience and no red carpet. Instead, a select few following strict COVID protocols will be in person as the winners are announced from the Beverly Hilton. Now, following a backlash over a lack of diversity, the HFPA also announced they will work to highlight projects, quote, from artists of diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds. Now, NBC announced in May it would not broadcast the 2022 show, saying, quote, change of this magnitude takes time and work. And we should note NBC News and NBC Broadcast are both entities of our parent company, NBC Universal. Now, the rise in COVID cases across the country is causing worrying numbers of staff shortages in our schools as students return to the classroom following the holiday break. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona spoke exclusively with NBC News on what the Biden administration is doing to help. NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbella joins us now with more on her exclusive and with what he had to say. Good morning, Heidi. So as we experience this shortage, as teachers get sick during this wave, what is the plan to cover those teachers, to backfill them, keep kids on track? I know there are sort of some of these creative options being explored here. Tell us about that.
Yes, Savannah. Well, first of all, he did seem to acknowledge, just for awareness, that things could get a little bit worse before they get better. But 2 things for starters. First, really doubling down, those were his words, on vaccination clinics and schools. We see really low rates, particularly among children ages 5 to 11. But the big stressor here really is the testing. The administration outlined before the holidays this program called Test to Stay, which would require many, many rapid tests that just aren't on the market yet. Here's what he had to say about what they plan to do about that.
We're hearing from the field that they want some waivers so that we can get more bus drivers. Funding from the American Rescue Plan can be used to address some of these shortages. We're encouraging districts to bring back retired teachers without penalty to their pension, with a good bonus, get them back in the classroom. Talk to the colleges to get our seniors that are going to be pre-service teachers in the classroom earlier.
And Savannah, he's, of course, there talking about the shortages and busing waivers, as well as the additional tests that they want to get to schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear some of those solutions, like bringing teachers who were retired back and all those types of things, because I know parents are just wondering, what do I do if my kid's teacher ends up out sick. And yes, as you say, that expanded testing. Heidi, I think, though, as we all know, I mean, so many parents want their kids back in the classroom. This is so tough on students, especially young students. Is this goal of being in the classroom, being better, of the stress of the last year for students really still kind of top of mind to get them back into the classroom, even as we are in the midst of getting these expanded testing and vaccine clinics unveiled?
Well, yeah, we saw that yesterday from the president. And matter of fact, Savannah, our interview with the secretary was moments after Biden spoke. They saw what happened last year. Now that we're getting these autopsies in about the damage that was done both academically and emotionally, the underserved communities in this nation are disproportionately affected, with some children in those communities remaining up to about a year behind in terms of learning loss. And so they don't want a repeat of that. It was also politically damaging. For instance, we saw what happened in the race in Virginia. Take a listen to what the secretary had to say, which was really similar to the president's message.
The goal is to have our children in school. That's where they need to be. I think educators across the country want that too. We just have to work together to make sure we're problem solving together, to keep them in the classroom, keep them safe, keep our educators safe, and keep our parents happy too, because they want their children back in school as well.
And the secretary is reminding all districts and schools and states, Savannah, that there's billions of dollars from the federal government on the sidelines here that they can be using for these tests once they are on the market. Savannah?
All right, Heidi, great exclusive interview there on a topic that so many parents are concerned about. Thanks for joining us, Heidi. Now, meanwhile, the push to get tested for COVID will now be more expensive, for Americans. That's because the deal between the White House and retailers to offer discounted prices for the rapid at-home COVID tests expired in December, meaning stores like Walmart and Kroger are now raising their prices on the tests many Americans have come to rely on. The higher prices come as people wait days for the results to the more accurate PCR test that you often have to go out to find. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez takes us inside one of the country's largest labs, which says it is busier than ever.
Across parts of the country, lines for COVID rapid tests are growing, but also people are waiting days for the results for the more accurate PCR tests. Well, we got an inside look at one of the facilities processing those tests. With lines for rapid COVID tests snaking nationwide, wait times for more accurate PCR test results are also stretching longer.
I would love to have my results. I want to go back to work.
There we go. NBC News got a rare look inside one of the largest testing facilities in the country. Is this running basically 24/7 now?
Correct. 24/7, 365. We never shut down.
This is Northwell Health's 100,000 square foot core lab outside New York City. These samples were processed just within the last few hours. These arrived just within the past day and are about to be put into a machine like that one. Right now, this lab alone is handling 25,000 tests a day. Of those tests, about a third turn out to be COVID positive. Virtually all, Dr. Dwayne Brining says, are Omicron. How quickly did the Omicron variant really take hold?
From 1 week to the next, it went from 20% of our cases to 80% of our cases. That was about 2 weeks ago, so we're up in the 100% range now.
The typical turnaround time for test results here is less than 48 hours. Other smaller labs are taking much longer.
So far, we're hanging on, but we're hanging on by our fingernails.
Northwell is also launching a new system where patients can track their results by scanning a unique barcode with their smartphones.
This tube comes into the laboratory. When it's received here, you get a text message that says your specimen's in the laboratory.
But for those still waiting, what would you tell people who are frustrated that we're not further along in testing nearly 2 years into this pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's taken a while for government to get on its footing and to have a coherent response to this. I think we're more on the right track now than we were before, but we're still catching up to this.
That lab says about half of its positive COVID tests are from people who are not showing symptoms. Back to you.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, fascinating work there. Thank you so much. Now, a decision to allow tennis superstar Novak Djokovic to compete in the Australian Open without being vaccinated is igniting major controversy this morning. In a social media post last night, the men's #1 player said he was heading, quote, down under with exemption permission. The announcement has sparked criticism in Australia, where COVID cases have soared in recent months. But tournament organizers said Djokovic was not given any special treatment.
We completely understand and empathize with first of all, some people being upset about the fact that Novak has come in because of his statements over the past couple of years around vaccination. However, it's ultimately up to him to discuss with the public his condition if he chooses to do that and the reason why he received an exemption. We as an event, also as a state and as a country, will do everything we possibly can to give everyone an equal and fair opportunity to come into the country.
John Wertheim is a senior writer at Sports Illustrated and joins us now. John, good to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here. So organizers say Djokovic is one of a handful of players to be granted this exemption. And while we don't know the reason for this specifically, he has publicly expressed skepticism toward COVID vaccines in the past. This is something that we've seen affecting quite a few different sports. What do you sort of make of this about him getting in, us not exactly having the details here? And do you think he'll sort of be forced to explain himself more as pressure grows in terms of why he's not vaccinated?
Yeah, as we speak, he's flying to Australia. And just within the last few hours, the Prime Minister has said he must provide a reason. What is his grounds for exemption? Or he'll be sent on the next flight home. We'll see if that holds. But yeah, I mean, this is sort of the continuation of a parlor game of the last few months of will Djokovic go? Will he not go? He has been at best vague about his stance on vaccination. And now it appears he's unvaccinated. He found an exemption. And, you know, despite what the tournament organizer said, I think there's a lot of skepticism. What is this acute medical condition, which was the grounds for getting exemption? What is the acute medical condition that no one seems to know about that hasn't prevented him from, it has not stopped him from being an extraordinary tennis player? So there's a lot of skepticism.
Absolutely. John, let's actually listen to that sound from the Prime Minister discussing what could happen when he reaches the border and providing that reason for vaccination.
If he's not vaccinated, he must provide acceptable proof that he cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons and to be able to access the same travel arrangements as fully vaccinated travellers. So we await his presentation and what evidence he provides to support that. If that evidence is insufficient, then he won't be treated any different to anyone else and he'll be on the next plane home. So there should be no special rules for Novak Djokovic at all, none whatsoever.
So, John, as someone who covers this and can take some clues from what we've heard from him before, I mean, what do you think we could hear? And also, what would this sort of mean for his image if he were, in fact, to be denied entry?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, the bigger context here, he is going for this tennis record. He's trying to move past Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal and win his 21st major. He's won the Australian Open 9 times. This is also happening in Australia, which has had these brutal measures during COVID. Something like 93% of the population is vaccinated. So this will not help his image. We had a story in Sports Illustrated just last week, sort of, this is an extraordinary tennis player and somebody also with extraordinary powers of self-sabotage. This will not help his image one way or the other.
Absolutely. John Wertheim from Sports Illustrated. Really interesting stuff. And we will see what happens when he lands in just a little while. Thank you for joining us. And coming up, the biggest event in technology is set to get underway in Vegas. Despite that COVID surge, we'll check in with the organizers of CES Tech Conference for more on what to expect. That's next on Morning News Now. It's time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you. Bertha Coombs is with us this morning in her Wednesday pink. Bertha, good morning. Good to see you.
In honor of you, Savannah. So we are looking at electric vehicles. A lot of automakers saying they want to go all electric or mostly electric by 2030. Well, Chrysler says it wants to shift to an all-electric lineup by 2028. The automaker will introduce new products, including a utility vehicle, and it's going to be showing them off, at least the concept of the Airflow utility vehicle, at the Consumer Electronics Show. Plan is for the brand to offer its first electric vehicle by 2025, and Chrysler's parent company, Stellantis, aims to invest more than $30 billion to electrify its lineup. Meantime, American Express and BlackRock are the latest big financial companies to extend their hybrid work plans as COVID cases surge across the country. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager, and it's giving employees flexibility to work wherever they're most comfortable through January 28th. Amex is delaying the launch of its Flex program in the U.S. It had planned to start bringing staff back to the office on January 24th. And because we got to talk about food in the morning, right? KFC is launching plant-based fried chicken nationwide for a limited time starting next Monday. KFC tested the product made by Beyond Meat at select locations in Atlanta in 2019 and a couple of other markets, and they sold out the entire supply in less than 5 hours. While it's plant-based, the fried chicken may not be what vegetarians or vegans like because they are prepared on the same equipment as regular chicken. So if you're really strict, that may bother you. So you should be forewarned about that. But, you know, it is January. A lot of folks try to go vegan. So they're doing their part with Beyond Meat.
Bertha, you know what else a lot of people like to try to do in January is be a little bit healthier, not be eating so much fast food. And now it's 7:50 in the morning, and I'm thinking about how yesterday you tempted me with Little Caesars and Chipotle, and now KFC. We need like a fast food tracker.
Well, you know,
Bertha
the non-meat's a little bit healthier.
You what?
The non-meat's a little bit healthier,
That's true. That's true. And that's cool that they're doing that. But Bertha, all right, now I'm just hungry once again. Thank you so much. All right, the world of tech is getting a major upgrade this week. The massive CES, Consumer Electronics Show, starts today in Las Vegas with big-name companies dropping their newest and most innovative products. Some companies are planning to tap into the metaverse, while others are releasing new cars, phones, and even, get this, a self-driving tractor. Now, despite Omicron surging and more than 1 million Americans testing positive in the span of 24 hours, the show will go on mostly in person. That move has led to some big names like General Motors and Amazon to bow out of this year's in-person events. Joining me now is Allison Freed, a spokesperson for the CES Technology Show. Allison, good morning. Thanks for joining us on such a busy day for you, I'm sure. So we'll get to the COVID side of this conference in just a minute. But first, let's talk about what people can expect this year. What are some of the big companies, some big launches, some big products? A self-driving tractor, that sounds pretty cool. What should we be on the lookout for at this year's CES?
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me. We are so happy to be back in Las Vegas for CES 2022. Last year was an all virtual event. This year we're happy to be back in person. Lots of very, very cool stuff going on the show floor this year. Vehicle technology, like you guys were talking about, electric and autonomous are going to be huge stories at the show. We've got food tech, we've got space tech, and then obviously digital health, a huge story this year. Exhibitors trying to, working to get us on the other side of this pandemic. So lots going on. The show kicks off this morning and runs through Friday, January 7th.
It's always so cool to see some of the things that come out of CES. I mean, things that you just almost can't even believe are happening now and not in some far off distant future. So it's so cool to see. So let's talk about the COVID side now. So we know some of your events will be virtual, but the Consumer Technology Association is still choosing to hold events with more than 2,000 exhibitors in person. The association says in part about that, we're confident that attendees and exhibitors can have a socially distanced but worthwhile and productive event in Las Vegas. What's your message to people who are questioning why this conference still has in-person events, especially of that size? And how are you protecting people who do show up?
Right. So we are working to be able to safely convene tens of thousands of people here this week to do business. CES is an industry-only trade show, and this is where the industry advances forward and innovates. So our member companies said, that they wanted to have this show, and we took the approach of making sure we had a layered system in place to try to keep people health and safe. So to start off, it's a vaccinated only event. So everyone has to be vaccinated. When you register, you get a COVID testing kit. So everyone has 2 tests. We're asking everyone to test 24 hours before they come on site and then test throughout the show. The state of Nevada has a mask mandate, so everyone will have masks here. We've also reconfigured the way that the show floor is laid out. So much wider aisles, one-way directional traffic, really trying to make it as safe as possible for people to get in here, to do business, to advance the industry so that we all are working, living, and playing better through technology.
All right. We will wait and see what else comes out of this conference. Allison Freed, thank you so much again for joining us as you kick this off.
Thank you.
And coming up, the weather outside is frightful, and how you respond to it could impact your mental health. The ways you can keep you and your loved ones safe during the winter, including how to protect your four-legged friend. That's next. Welcome back. There's no doubt we're in the middle of winter. By now, you've seen videos of cars trapped on snow-covered highways in Virginia, and in other parts of the country, snow's piling up. This weather can be a real nuisance, but it can also be really dangerous for your health. NBC News consumer and investigative correspondent Vicki Nguyen shows us ways to stay safe this winter.
Freezing temperatures, snow and ice, all making for dangerous conditions during the winter.
What are the most common injuries when winter comes around?
I'm in the emergency room in Colorado, where we typically see a lot of winter injuries. And probably the biggest one are people slipping and falling on ice.
In 2019 alone, fall-related injuries sent more than 8 million Americans to the emergency room.
They'll hurt their backs, they'll hurt their heads, they'll hurt their shoulders.
To avoid slipping and falling, make sure you have shoes with traction. If you have to brave the snow and ice, walk like a penguin. Slightly point your feet out and bend your knees, extend your arms out to your sides for balance, and take short steps or shuffle. Every year, snow shoveling causes thousands of injuries and about 100 deaths, most caused by heart attacks.
Something as simple as shoveling snow can actually be fairly dangerous.
It's a very, very strenuous workout. So even though they're feeling the symptoms, they're feeling chest pain, they're feeling shortness of breath, they have this goal of a driveway they want to clear, so they keep moving forward.
Symptoms of a heart attack can include chest discomfort, shortness of breath, even nausea. Besides taking frequent breaks, push the snow instead of lifting it. If you must lift, only partially fill the shovel so it's lighter. And remember to use your legs, not your back. Also, consider using an ergonomic shovel like this one to avoid back injuries. Snowblowers can save you time and energy when clearing snow, but they can also cost you a trip to the hospital. On average, nearly 6,000 injuries result from snowblowers each year. According to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, most snowblower injuries happen when someone tries to clear snow from the discharge chute. First, stop the engine. Use a long stick, not your hands, to unclog the machine. Add fuel when the engine is cold and do it in a well-ventilated area outdoors. Remember, never run your snowblower in a shed or a garage because of carbon monoxide dangers. Known as the silent killer, every year carbon monoxide poisoning kills hundreds and sickens thousands more. A majority of the deaths occurring between November and February, when many use portable generators for warmth.
Your home can contain other potential sources of carbon monoxide, including the fireplace if you don't have it ventilated and working properly. That's why you want to make sure you have enough of these carbon monoxide detectors installed throughout your house.
If you plan to use a space heater in your home, don't get burned.
As the name suggests, give the heater some space. Keep it at least 3 feet away from anything flammable like this dog bed, and always plug it directly into the wall, never a power strip.
And if you do have to brave the elements, make sure you dress in layers. And don't forget about your four-legged family members, especially if your dog has a short coat like Moose here. Get him a sweater or a parka. And don't forget the booties. It's a fetching and functional look. Booties protect your dog's paws from the cold, salt, and other irritants. But try telling that to Moose.
Good boy. It takes a little getting used to, huh?
Okay, thank you, Vicki, for those tips. And I have to admit, I just got my own dog some sweaters and vests because it's cold outside. All right, that does it for this hour of Morning News Now, but the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.